and good morning, everybody. I just wanted to start with a little bit more context and appreciate the sort of intro there, Alistair. There's something extra I'd like to add, just to give you a bit of context as why I'm so passionate about this subject. Early days in my career, very early on site, around 13 years old, lots of labouring jobs. I've got a real intimate understanding through various roles I've had about how tough construction done traditionally can be. I've laboured for about 8 or 9 different trades until I got to about 20 years old and decided to take a different turn and took a job at Mirvac. Starting at the bottom of the rung of the ladder at a building cadet phase, and at that stage, photocopier was my best friend, but all the administrative duties I undertook. And across the 20 years I've been at Mirvac, I've done pretty much all of my staff's current jobs, estimating, project management, site management, and the likes. I share this because I do really have an intimate appreciation and empathy for just how tough it is to do things traditionally in the industry we've selected. And that ties into this presentation today. And the title of Amazing Benefits and Real Challenges is definitely what I want to talk about, but the undertone is around efficiency and how do we create more efficiency within the project and also within our operations. And I hope you'll find that this presentation doesn't only just talk about the benefits, but I want to share a lot of the proof that we've been able to uncover in our journey. So I'll start with that journey, Mirvac and prefab. You know, quite a while ago, 2013, we really seen a lot of challenges, and I started to unpack quite a few of the pain points that exist in what we all know to be is a pretty challenging industry. In 2013, we trialled 2 homes using prefab walls and floors, found some amazing benefits on time saving. From there, we extended into another project, 110 homes. Again, significant benefits on program saving. And at that stage, we were very focused on program and safety benefits.
David, just before you go on, is you meant to be sharing your screen at the moment? Because it's not up at the moment.
Oh, apologies. Yep.
That's okay. No, I thought you had some slides there when you were talking to that part. Now we're up and running. Thanks.
Okay. So our journey so far, as I described, we started really early days, you know, where the industry wasn't doing this sort of stuff in the domestic, sort of suburban, inner ring type of housing market. And we pushed boundaries quite a bit and partnered with a manufacturer back then where we really wanted to sort of, you know, improve efficiencies in the delivery of construction. And in a development / builder company like ours, time is really, really important. And feasibility metrics are also very important. So we were really focused on time savings to start with. As we continued on through our journey, we learned that there are significantly more benefits in more categories than we could have ever imagined. And we've continued on further and further over the years. And we also started recently into bathroom pods last year as well, where understanding bathroom pods is not new in the apartments sector, but very much a new thing in sort of suburban housing. So I just wanted to do that quickly just to set in the scene. We've been doing this a long time. We've learned a lot. So I hope you can appreciate what I'm going to share today isn't just a potential idea. It's something that we've been able to prove and have real data. Something I want to show first is just some completed homes of what we've delivered using prefab walls and floors particularly, and also bathroom pods. The reason I show this is because it does express one of the first challenges we encountered, and that is making sure that we don't compromise on our design excellence in order to achieve prefab. The big shift in this country compared to the rest of the areas around the world that do prefab very well is our market likes bespoke, unique designs. And as you can see there, we haven't compromised on the design. We haven't been forced down a path to do a box on box with no windows because that would be easy. We've been able to achieve a good balance, and we continue to achieve that. And I think that's an important thing that I want to share throughout today's presentation. So I want to start firstly with summary of the benefits, a bit of a high level, and I'll start with the benefits for the builder. Again, please be patient. I'm going to do high level, and I'm going to show you how all of these things we've been able to collect data and prove these points. A lot of these things are pretty obvious, but we've been able to put metrics around this so we can better understand and better learn as we go. So I use ranges there reduced by 20 to 40% because we learnt along the way that depends on what you're building in terms of how much time you'll save. The extent of materials you use, whether or not it's a double story, a 3-story, what kind of cladding material. So we've been able to see many benefits for the builder program, Site prelims, obviously, if the program's reduced, then your site prelim costs are reduced. Construction waste removal has been a big benefit, and I'll show you some great explanation of why that's not just about waste removal and what other benefits that brings. Scaffold hire period, I'll talk about how that connects massively to safety risk reductions. So does on-site labour requirements, and I think everyone will appreciate in the current climate of our industry, with labour shortages being probably at the worst we've ever seen them, it's been something that we have some real strong data that has actually helped our business become more project and operationally efficient. I'll explain and show some real exciting and some phenomenal data about the administrative tasks that are reduced through utilising off-site methods of construction. I talked about the safety, and there are many subcategories to the safety piece: manual handling, incidents, injuries, but one that's kind of near and dear to my heart is the work-related stress and fatigue. You know, I've done a lot of those jobs, but I also do have 21 years in this business. My team is like my second family. I don't like to see them stressed, and I'll show you and explain how some of the things we've been able to do has really reduced that level of stress and fatigue, which effectively creates an increased performance, because as we most of us know, a stressed and fatigued person can much easier potentially make mistakes. Also gives us an ability to get rid of that inconsistent quality, especially in our business where we grow to volumes very high very quickly, and it is hard to keep that consistent quality when you've grown volumes. Stakeholders throughout our industry are all benefiting from prefab though, and I use this slide to just broadly explain that. The benefits for the customer, certainty of delivery, and again, with the way things are at the moment, you know, certainty of delivery for the customer is really important, because extending program durations is happening everywhere due to supply chain and labour shortages. But also improved performance and durability. When you are doing components in a controlled environment, you can unlock a higher level of performance and durability. We've also got benefits to the community in reducing waste, which is one thing, but we're starting to capture a lot of the carbon footprint reductions. And you'll see what I mean. And it's pretty obvious that if you're delivering major components pulled together, you're not actually bringing hundreds of different extra vehicles to site. So there is a far bigger benefit on the carbon footprint, which is becoming more and more important in our industry to capture, manage, and understand how we become closer to net zero. Also, we've got benefits for the architect, which I will make a point here to say this is really important, because in an integrated model company like Mirvac, where the developer, the builder, the architect are all under the one roof, you know, we do really have to show and share all stakeholders' benefits for them. You know, our internal architect partners, initially, if I can be polite about it and say, weren't too happy with the concept of me trying to push for a prefab model. Since we've delivered as many as we've had, and we found a balance between allowing architects to be able to put their, you know, aesthetic value towards the product, whatever that may be, but also having a balance to allow efficiency and utilization of design for manufacturer, logistics, assembly principles. We've been able to prove that you get efficiency in the delivery of documentation, reduced documentation detailing, especially if you utilize digital engineering software that's on the market this day and age, which is pretty fantastic. You get more consistency, and then obviously with consistency creates a bit of consistent workmanship. One of the other ones, and the stakeholder that's most important to Mirvac as a developer, project metrics and internal rate of return and return on invested capital are what drives our business. And so when I could share over time to the developer explaining what benefit it is for them, there is a significant engagement and contribution to wanting to move this forward as being a bigger part of our business. And probably the last one there, just to sort of say, project delivery risk is at the highest level I think anyone's ever seen. These elements of being able to deliver, utilizing offsite manufacturing and prefab has reduced so many risks for us. And I look forward to sort of sharing through this presentation some of those pretty amazing series of benefits. Now, I often talk all the positives and all the benefits, but the reality is there's also a lot of challenges. And I want to spend some time talking about the challenges, because there is really no point singing the praise of how amazing it is without balancing out the understanding that there are challenges, especially in this country. I've made these slides as simple as possible. I didn't want these to be fancy because I think it's the content that's most important. First and foremost, the biggest challenge is prefab does cost more in comparison to traditional construction in domestic housing. But we have slowly over time been able to understand how we can put forward solutions. And I want to share with as many people as possible how we can utilize different solutions to offset some of these challenges. And with the cost, first and foremost, I'm sure most people would understand design for manufacture, logistics and assembly principles. There are a lot of them, and I won't spend time going through them. That's a whole presentation on its own, but suffice to say, considering in the design elements that are going to create the best efficiency in order to be able to prefab elements. And that will reduce costs and making sure you get in early. Another one that we were challenged with very early when we started this is the upfront cost for prefab is more, but as we've gone on, I've been able to prove all these other savings in terms of prelim savings, duration savings, risk savings. You can bring that up front and use it as a real, genuine offset to those upfront costs. Also, economies of scale. The smarter we can get about making elements efficient, we get a larger scale and it does reduce the cost. And the last one there, which is a really big one, is utilizing technology. Today, we have a lot of technology at our fingertips. We really do need to utilize things like BIM, 3D, 4D, 5D. Being able to utilize technology does create a lot of reduction in the potential extra cost that happens during construction. And I can show you some examples later. The next challenge there, which I briefly mentioned earlier, is customer expectations. And that customer I'm talking about is not just the end user, but internal customer, whether it's a developer or even the architect. Personalized designs in this country are very much part of the market. When I've traveled the world and looked at how the other countries have unlocked prefab, well, it's a little bit of a different circumstance. Scandinavian countries, European countries, they're doing a lot of prefab, but they're highly focused on thermal performance, the performance and durability of their home, and not as wedded to the aesthetics as what we are in Australia. And so what I found one of my most difficult things is to try and educate the customer, regardless of whether it's the end user or the internal, about how you balance that design excellence and then also be able to adopt the DFMLA principles. And how do you do that? You have to provide evidence. And we've been able to capture data and evidence to be able to prove the performance is greater through prefab. And then you also have to demonstrate the value to those customers about finding that balance between aesthetics and performance. Another major challenge, which I think is honestly probably the hardest one, is just change management in general. You know, we've got a mindset in Australia where we're pretty late to adopt innovations. We're, you know, really sort of bringing up the tail when it comes to construction around the world and adopting prefab. And what I'm finding more than anything is there's some real strong change management principles and techniques you can adopt in order to be able to create an engagement to people to come along for the ride and not see this as a scary thing, but actually a massive benefit and an exciting thing. I had early challenges even with my own staff, you know, old school professionals. What do you mean prefab, Dave? I'm used to doing what I've been doing. If it's not broken, why are we fixing it? And my response is always, well, it may not be broken, but if it can be done better and more efficiently, why wouldn't we try it? And I think one of the ways to do that and to help people is implement strong governance to assist in that change management and have some support. And then most importantly, again, you'll see throughout this presentation, is demonstrate the value and benefit to those various stakeholders because it benefits everybody. And then you'll find obviously people do come along for the ride a little bit easier. Some other challenges, and this first one on this slide is a real big challenge. The manufacturing supply chain for prefab elements there's not a lot of manufacturers out there that can do what we need to be done, and that's not their fault. It's a reality of supply and demand. We do need to be able to have an increased adoption of prefab, builders wanting to do this more, understanding how to do it, and it will bring more supply chain, bring more competition, reduce the cost. So there are solutions, but this is one where in a climate where labour shortages throughout the supply chain, and particularly in the factory level, is making it difficult. But ultimately, I do feel like the more adoption is going to create more opportunity. And then the early engagement and having a builder manufacturer risk sharing balance is something that I can't go into detail on this one because it'll take too long. But ultimately, There needs to be a better balance. One of the reasons why supply chain in terms of this is the manufacturers do wear a lot of the risk. And we've been able to, with our supply chain partnerships, share a bit in that risk. The next one is around intense planning requirements. And people see this as a challenge. I see this as a benefit. In construction in Australia, we're often, let's sort it out when we get there type of mentality. We do need to ensure that we understand there is more planning required if you're going to do prefab. But if you implement structured governance to assist in that planning requirement, you do make it a lot easier. If you utilize technology, BIM, digital engineering, again, it can make it much easier. And then again, just establish and educate people on the appreciation and the benefits of better planning. The idea of trying to work out a detail on a two-dimensional drawing when we're on the site and the sub is waiting to get the answer, the supervisor's waiting to figure it, that's old school. We don't need to do it like that. If we utilize the technology, we can solve a lot of things in the digital environment. We can solve a lot of things through prefab that create a much better benefit on the ground. And the last one there is a challenge and also an opportunity. I call it a challenge because, again, adopting new things in this country, I've found time and time again quite difficult. Digital engineering in a high-end office space or high-end apartment spaces has been adopted for a while. Larger budgets, more opportunity to invest in that concept. The domestic housing builder space is a lot harder to adopt this because there is a cost there. But again, if we invest in the software to unlock efficiency, you'll find that that is a far, far bigger benefit for the cost that it is. And we do need to educate and train a lot of people to understand how much easier it is to do what we do if you adopt some of that digital engineering. 3D is one thing, and being able to visualize, understand, pick apart details. 4D, for those that don't understand, to be able to plan out a job in the digital virtual environment and make as many mistakes as you want, and it won't matter. So when you get to site, it is much easier. 5D, the estimating component, to draw data from the model to be able to get accuracy in estimating. And that's the sort of stuff that really is the next level, I believe, for the domestic housing industry as well. And the last one there is to be able to understand that a lot of the supply chain is utilizing modeling in their factories to build components. If we're all utilizing a federated model, we can sort out so much in the front end prior to getting into construction. So lots of challenges, but there are solutions for them all. Now, we've been doing some case studies, and I've got to say, when I started the concept within Mirvac, as I said earlier, even to the board level, there's a bit of hesitation. Why we've gotten to such a support level is capturing data to prove the benefits is really the way to get people on board. It also offsets the somewhat known challenges that we have as well. So I want to share some case studies that we've done. First one was late 2020 in Doncaster, Victoria, prefab walls and floors. We had a group of 4 pretty large terraces right next to another 4 very large terraces, just happened to be the same designs. We did 4 on the left-hand side traditionally, and 4 on the right-hand side using prefab walls and floors. The data we collected was pretty phenomenal. Clearly it was faster, less waste I mentioned before, less risk, less labor on site, less high-risk works, manual handling a significant shift. And I will say most people don't see just how much injury there is in musculoskeletal injuries through sprains and strains. And so this is a big one, and I'll share some more detailed data on that in another case study example. But the other thing is quality. Again, when you are doing major structural components in a factory, you are able to get a higher level of quality. And we've been able to do a lot of work on blower door testing to be able to get the benefits through air tightness, which is obviously something that's becoming more important with new NCC and NatHERS requirements in terms of air changes per hour. I rushed through this one quickly because it was a couple of years ago, but it was a really great opportunity to capture benchmark data on traditional, prefab data, compare the two, and there's really nothing you can argue because they're data that can be really interrogated. Second case study. Now this is bathroom pods. And again, I've said apartments have used bathroom pods for a long time. Very rare in the housing market unless you're a remote building. And even then it's pretty rare. And why? Again, traditional built bathrooms in housing is very cheap. Bathroom pods is more expensive. And I'll be very honest about that. But we've been able to learn our way through the benefits that offset that phenomenally. And I just want to share, firstly, a little time-lapse video. Because sometimes showing stats and data is great, but visually and pictorially explaining the benefits. So this is just a video where I'll just show you that this is 19 minutes of footage, both the top and the bottom. The bottom is effectively what we've done, which is to create benchmark data. We ran time-lapse cameras in multiple homes for traditional built bathrooms. In the 19 minutes that it took us to hook, lift, place, and fix a fully completed bathroom, where the black plastic you see there, once you take that off, there is literally nothing else to do but to paint the door frame. In that same period of time, down the bottom, you can see old mate there is, poor guy, he's trying to just cut that one piece of material. He's in and out, and he's got his mate in there to give him a bit of a hand. Like, I find this not to be disrespectful to traditional, but this is just the way it is. It is a significant component and amount of items to do it traditionally in comparison to prefab. And how we've done this is to be able to, again, capture the data for the benchmark first. And this is how we've been able to do it. We did bathroom pods on 26 homes, 2 bathroom pods per home, 52 pods. We were able to run time-lapse cameras to understand what that would have been if we did it traditionally. And as everyone would know, traditionally you need to engage 9 different subcontractors, and for each one, tendering, purchase orders, program management, inductions, HSC, warranty, defect, it's a very long process. Scheduling calls, emails, meetings, we captured all of that and what it would take to do it traditionally. And then we compared it to what it was done using prefab. And instead of 9 trades you're engaging 1. We were fortunate to partner with Sync, very experienced manufacturer. We've been able to learn with each other. It was the first time they'd ever done pods on residential houses. You can see what we actually were able to capture in the stats below, and I won't have you trying to look at the comparison because we've done it. I always sort of pause before I continue on this slide because these numbers blew my mind as well. I had to check them, and I checked them personally because honestly, you've got to be careful putting up numbers like this because people like to challenge you. And the amount of times we diligently double-checked and triple-checked our data, and it's reality. 78% reduction in scheduling notifications required by supervisors. 75% reduction in phone calls. The one I like the most is emails. I get frustrated with emails. Yeah, you can really confuse things and not convey the right tone necessarily, or there is definitely a potential for errors to come through emails. To have a 94% reduction in emails required to run those bathrooms is a phenomenal benefit. Inspections as well, to have a 71% reduction in on-site inspections is, look, this is actually being conservative because the reality is, as we know, the way the current climate is, it's actually becoming harder, particularly in areas like bathrooms. But we looked at other areas too. This is site staff administrative benefits, which actually promote operational efficiency. But there's also project efficiency and de-risk scenarios as well. Through the time-lapse footage, we captured that to do one bathroom, you end up having, and again, we had to check and watch multiple videos, over 400 times a subby will walk in and out of a bathroom. Whether it's in and out 50 times to do measure, but if you capture that over the 26 homes that we did, almost 22,000 entries and exits if we did it traditionally, down 98%. The amount of workers required over the period of time to attend site to do 52 bathrooms was 3,328, down 96% if we did bathroom pods. And we were pretty astounded by that. Look at it another way, man hours, again, significant reduction. In terms of days on site, we were able to put in these 52 bathrooms in 7 days, not consecutive 7 days, but 7 days worth of work. If we did it traditionally, it would have been 109 days worth of work. Now you can see there where we're starting to collect the data to really prove the benefits and really saying to our business, yeah, okay, it costs a little bit more, but look at what we're getting for that extra money. And the money is not that much extra when you see these benefits. Final case study, walls and floors. And this is one that we're doing right now. Started construction in January. Project is 179 homes in southwestern Sydney at Moorebank. We've partnered with our brothers at Timber Truss, having done a lot of work leading up to this to be able to get us to the next layer of prefab. We're doing even more on the walls than ever before. Once again, I can show you stats, and I will in a minute. But before I do, let me just explain to you through this visual representation about some of the benefits the way we see it. Now, this is the first 16 homes of 179. This 16 homes at this stage is about a week ago. To get to this level of completed construction traditionally would have taken about 20, 21 weeks. We got to this in 10. But what is other areas of real big benefit is we haven't done a site clean yet. Look at the ground. At this stage, with all cladding completed, we would normally have an absolute minefield of materials everywhere. We only have, I think, 4 bins across this whole site. Normally, we'd have to have a bin on every single site. Normally, this would be an ant's nest of activity, of trades walking over the top of each other, carrying Hebel panels up and down scaffold, all eliminated. 190 tons worth of material was lifted into place here rather than individuals carrying it. When we can represent it this way, and we've been able to show this internally and externally, it creates a different measure of appreciation. Stats are great, but when you can see the visual shift, and I can tell you my project team here, once we're a little bit negative on this concept, now we'll really putting a pressure on me to say, I don't want to do it the other way anymore. I'd prefer to keep it like this. Now in Sydney, when we've had circa 36% of the total possible working days this year rained out, I can tell you the benefits have become even more phenomenal. So what are some of the stats we've been able to pick up on this one? It's even getting better. Program benefits, superstructure, to get to lock up 54% quicker. External cladding work 67% quicker. Flooring is one that I always sort of say, like, floor cassettes are not new. Not a lot of people do it, again, because of the cost, but most people know 2-story home, regular size, maybe a day, maybe a bit over a day to do traditional floor. We're getting average 45 to 50 minutes to complete a floor, and no one's working at height. No carpenters are trying to walk along floor joist in order to be able to complete their job. There's no carrying of materials. The overall duration, I talk about up to lockup, but overall duration at a 30% reduction in this current climate with all delays, phenomenal benefit. Waste reduction at 60%, again, like, it's not just not having waste on site. That's less phone calls to the waste contractor to come pick up a bin. It's less labourers picking up elements after each other after every day. It's less tasks, it's less invoices, it's a lot less work. It's not just less waste on site. Scaffold hire is a big one. To have a 53% reduction in scaffold hire, phenomenal risk benefit. There is also the manual handling element I mentioned before. These first 16 homes, 191 tonne of material lifted into place. If you were to use the 20 kilogram rule per person, that's 9,500 less manual lifts. We worked out by the time the project finishes, it's going to be over 400,000 less manual lifts. Now, I walk on other sites where we don't do prefab, and I watch guys trying to carry an 80 kilo panel of Hebel up the scaffold and try and slide it in between the scaffold and the frame. It's not just the lifts, it's the risk associated with those lifts. But the safety risks are phenomenal reductions. No material cutting on site. You've got such an ability to reduce risk through not having to cut all these materials. We're doing more and more, not just Hebel, lightweight cladding, shrouds, windows. There's a lot of benefit, and we're able to reduce the 2 biggest risks in the industry, falls from heights and falling objects. If you've got 53% less higher period, you're reducing the potential for those risks by that. So I will say the next step for us is to continue going above and beyond. All the prefab learning that we've done, we've been able to unlock new opportunities for our business. Most people would be aware that there is various entities within the Mirvac group. I look after the Masterplanned Communities. There is a national operations manager that looks after our apartments business. Our apartments is a tier 1 organisation. Obviously, we've got a scenario where we could also do apartments as a Masterplanned Communities business, but how do we get those efficiencies? Well, we've got a few projects coming up, and one I want to share with you that's going to start next year in Victoria at Altona North. By all of our learnings all this time, we've been able to, in the earliest concept phases, utilise DFMLA principles in that concept phase. Utilising the digital element to transfer loads to make it most efficient to utilise a timber structure, a lightweight timber structure that we're not compromising on the actual aesthetics. We've been able to adopt the efficiencies to only have 6 bathroom types throughout 130 apartments. Floor plate efficiencies are easier using the digital model, and realistically how we've done this is through all of our learning, getting those contractor engagements in earlier, not just the manufacturer. Consultants, engineers, services structure, getting them in early, utilising technology, digital. We've been able to unlock on this project, which will start later next year, external walls, and pretty much everything you see in the image there. Internal walls, party walls, flooring, including fire rating requirements, and bathroom pods. Circa 40% of the build of this will be done in prefab. We're going to be able to save at least 15 to 20% on cost if it was done by our brothers in the apartments business. We're also able to save about 4 to 6 months off the program if it was done traditionally. We're now starting to unlock more opportunity in Mirvac's pipeline, circa 6,000 homes. I'll be honest and say we can't do prefab on all those homes, a lot because of the challenges I mentioned before. Supply chain's probably not there. We do need to have some flexibility in design where it doesn't suit, but we will continue to push the boundaries, try and utilize prefab in as much as we can, because we've learned, and now more than ever, project efficiency is so important. Operational efficiency that comes from project efficiency is becoming even more important. We do understand there's challenges and there's going to continue to be challenges, but those challenges are nowhere near as bad as when you look at when the benefits come forward. I'm a strong believer that if you utilize some of the learnings, if you make sure that you adopt early contractor engagement, DFMA principles, the ability to be able to appreciate, if you bring forward the benefits that you are going to realize using prefab, you can unlock efficiencies both at a project and business level that I think everyone will agree is more pertinent now than ever before. So many of the things I've talked about today, I could have gone into ultra detail. We don't have the time. I wanted to stick a little bit more high level. I hope you appreciate that this is information that Mirvac is comfortable to share, because we feel it's important to share to the industry to hopefully grow the appreciation and have more builders and more manufacturers adopt this way of construction, because it really is, I believe, a massive need for the future. Hope you've enjoyed, and look forward to answering any questions. Thank you.
Fantastic. And look, we've got a little bit of time, so if people have got questions, this is a real opportunity for you. You've got one of the leading experts here in Australia, so put your questions in the Q&A section. Yeah, no, fantastic statistics, David. You've really captured, you know, where the value is and what the challenges are and how to address them. But there is a question here from Jerry, which I must admit, Jerry Howard, I was thinking myself when I saw your image of your New South Wales job and saw that you were doing slabs on ground still. Jerry's actually asked, are most projects slab on ground, or do you use prefab for this element? Because yeah, we're quite keen to sort of see a move into sort of ground floor cassette systems as well. One of the main reasons obviously being it's pretty hard to get a slab level, and when you're doing all that sort of millimetre perfect prefab above it, you know, you can be stuffed just on slabs being out of square. Whereas if you start straight off a, you know, a sort of steel screw-in pole or whatever it happens to be, and you start with a cassette floor, you're going to be sort of perfect from that point on. Yeah, what's your thoughts on doing more prefab actually at the slab level as well?
Look, absolutely wanting to consider. I think I'll go back to the point around change management, customer acceptance. We started this journey with making sure that we're not going too far from the norm because then you're having to actually sell a whole new concept. So at the moment, yes, all slab on ground, and absolutely, yes, you cannot get millimetre perfect. We obviously do have system and process to be able to overcome that challenge. We would like to consider moving forward, and in some projects where we have quite heavy undulation of the site, we are utilising cassette flooring. Where the site is flat and it's more cost effective to use slab on ground, we are. And at the real sort of heart of it, we feel like it's a staged shift that customers still like and are comfortable with structural and foundation benefits through slab on ground. So we don't want to change things too much, but we're definitely considering it for certain projects.
Mm-hmm. Question here on your bathroom pods from Richard. What's the time difference in building the pod against the traditional construction of a bathroom? Yeah, so I mean, the guy's building the pod, you know, in the factory. How much difference really is it in time?
Look, I think it's a great question, and I'm glad you picked up that I didn't mention time savings in pods. Look, the reality is, building homes, most people are aware, bathrooms are not on critical path. However, as the labour shortages continue, we do have more and more benefit we're seeing. At this stage, we probably save on the overall duration of a circa 30-week build, maybe 2 weeks. It's not a big savings on time. However, as I say, the trade-based issue goes on, we see that benefit on time saving to grow.
Yep. And a question from Ali, how do you prepare the fire rating walls between the units? Are they built on site, or are they all prefab as well?
We do a bit of both, but ultimately we use the same systems that are in existence, and we're not doing anything new. So whether it's a Hebel system or using a CSR Redbook system, the reality is we're still using the exact same components with the exact same compliance. And lately we've been moving more into that Hebel party wall, which, yes, is done through a prefab element.
Yep. And Abigail was just asking, with some of the calculations around the time you were taking around hour calculations, did that factor in the manufacturing hours?
Look, no, it doesn't. And I think ultimately the reason why we don't, I'm coming from the perspective of the developer and the builder. The manufacturing hours are happening while I'm in pre-construction. I don't have to add that to our scale for our operational or project efficiency. And manufacturing is happening in Australia. We don't feel that there is realistically a cost-effective element to be able to import from overseas, especially when we're using the exact same elements in timber structure and materials externally. There are manufacturers overseas that have approached, and we've discussed many times, and the more I've looked into it, and especially now with some of the importation challenges, we do feel like that's a little bit too much of a risk.
Yep. Mario was just asking, you've shown some biggish projects here, but is there a cutoff point as to how small the project needs to be before it becomes non-practical or non-profitable?
It's a very good question. And yes, there is definitely that element of size. But as I mentioned in one of the examples, we did 4 homes and it was very profitable and practical. I think the reality is more about what you're using for prefab rather than how many. If you can get a majority of the elements done in the factory, then you can actually make it cost effective on one home. Ultimately, you've got far better economies of scales if you're doing it on a larger scale.
Yep. NASA was just asking about pre-wrapping penetrations for type A fire protection in your apartments. How do you manage that? Do you do that in the prefabrication, or is that done in situ?
That's done in situ.
Yep. And Richard was asking if you could just comment a bit more on the inspection process for compliance with the VCA requirements.
So we've done prefab elements in various different ways, as I've mentioned. So obviously when it comes to bathroom pods, you've got a watermark opportunity, and we get our certifiers to be able to visit the facility and to get their comfort through that level. And compliance comes from the manufacturer, just like any product you would normally buy. When it comes to walls and floors, you know, we dabbled with the concept of what we would say is closed panels, services and plasterboard all completed. And that created some of the problems. It meant bringing certifiers into the factory and starting to look at RFID locators to make sure that every single panel is labeled. We started to realize the benefit of services and plasterboard is minimal. So we continue to do open panel, which means structurally they come to site, certifier comes to site and inspects just like he would normally do. The benefit we do have, though, with engineered manufactured panels, we have a lot of data and certification from the factory that you wouldn't normally get building traditionally. So if anything, certifiers we deal with, they're actually really excited because they feel more comfortable signing off when you've had a really strong quality control, quality assurance process to build these elements.
Yep. Look, I encourage people online to put your questions in. David's obviously very good at answering the questions. So, yeah, anything you need to know, here's a good time to ask. David, I was really sort of interested in your challenges at the start about change management. I think that really is a sort of an interesting one. And you did talk about, again, one of the challenges also being more sort of supply chain capacity. And you know, through WoodSolutions, we've done quite a lot of work with the frame and truss sector about encouraging more people in this area. And there are certainly frame and truss manufacturers in each of the different states that are interested in a sort of townhouse, well, even sort of prefab detached dwellings, but particularly the townhouse and the class 2 apartments where there is some real sort of demonstrated savings. And we're wanting to actually get more involved. But as the projects get bigger, I guess the risk gets bigger in a sense. And that you mentioned before about, you know, one of the challenges is that builder manufacturer shared risk. Do you want to give us your thoughts on that a little bit more? I mean, how do we change that? How do you see the new paradigm where that might work, where everyone can share the risk, share the profit, and so you know, that risk issue becomes less of an issue of getting more of the supply chain involved?
Yeah, look, it's one that is probably delving into a little bit of detailed IP, but if I can say a bit more broadly, first and most importantly, I feel like it takes a different attitude. And so the kind of hard-nosed builder-vendor relationship won't work. Builders are used to payment on delivery terms, and ultimately there's got to be a discussion on that part. You can't put all the risk and responsibility on the manufacturer. There's got to be a shared responsibility. We've built towards that. Someone here has asked about, can I share my manufacturing partners? And I'm happy to, because as I say, I'm not sort of sounding all warm and fuzzy. They're like brothers. Like, it's taken a long time to get to that though. Timber Truss in Victoria is someone we've worked with for a long time, and we've been able to learn and share. And honestly, there's challenges. There's a bit of a, but you said, but we've been working through that. So it takes an open understanding that we cannot hold those old school principles of builder gets to demand and the manufacturer just has to do what is told. That won't work. You need a different nature, different attitude. We partner with Sync in terms of bathroom pods, same sort of thing. We do need to be able to share in those responsibilities. So contractually, from a level of being able to understand, is there a deposit, a potential retention? So there is contractual obligations that you do need to resolve, but more than anything, there's got to be protection for the manufacturer. And I think I won't mention the names, I don't need to. There's been prefab manufacturers that have had to close the doors because of this issue, where unfortunately builders either don't share in the risk. And that's the sort of stuff we need to make sure that if we're going to promote more manufacturers, the builders do need to take a bit more responsibility as well.
Mm-hmm. And look, I know we've had conversations even with our supply chain about, you know, some new partnership arrangement that could extend even broader further back. So it could be, you know, the builder, the manufacturer, and even the timber supplier. I mean, you know, people going into these big projects and partnering, you know, in a proper way. I mean, I know they do that in Europe quite often. We see probably less of it here, where it's been a little bit more transactional in terms of the relationship rather than sort of partnerships in terms of the relationship. But there's just a couple of design questions here which are of interest. So Abigail's just asked about with the houses don't have a lot of eaves or awnings. Is that has there been design limitations to that, or is that?
No, quite the opposite. And thanks, Abigail. Quite a few questions there. I always love getting that kind of engagement. The reality is, I talk about DFMA. We've actually done it the opposite way around, where we had existing DA approved, town planning approved designs that we've had to convert into prefab. So the main mandate from the business is, Dave, if you want to do prefab, that's fine. Don't ask me to compromise my design. Most of the homes you've seen in my presentation already had that kind of contemporary facade, parapet roofs. But in the imagery behind me, these homes were done with prefab as well. So the limitation ends up being, well, how much of that wall can you do in prefab? But absolutely not can we compromise the outcome of the design to do prefab. If anything, it's kind of more the other way around. What do we have to compromise in doing prefab in order to maintain the design intent?
Yep. Actually, a couple of questions there, David, just on your pods around set down. I couldn't see from the distance, but I think you do set downs anyway. So the pods are all at the
Got to keep in mind, New South Wales and Victoria have been always a bit different. Victoria, you know, we want to have that flush threshold. So we do set down our flooring in Victoria. New South Wales has had that kind of 40 mil angle step up for many years. Most builders do it. We're moving away from that as well. So we are definitely going to set down slabs and flooring, but we're doing most of our bathrooms on the first floor. So setting down and having sort of, you know, smaller posi struts, a 40 mil step down has actually become, it's really quite easy. We thought that would be a bit of a difficult one, but we found that's actually pretty straightforward. But yes, definitely want that flush threshold.
And Peter also just asks about selling the full prefab as part of the sales pitch to the consumer. I mean, well, one of the things I found particularly interesting from your benefits was that that quality to the consumers. I think that's, you know, people forget that and you rightly mentioned it, that in the factory you can get all of those quality things right. You can get all of the bits sealed up properly. You know, often on site it happens a bit, but it doesn't totally happen. You can't see how people have taped at the top of a door or a window, but you can definitely see it in the factory. You know, what's your feedback been there from the customers around the sort of quality that they can get?
So look, interestingly enough, I had a sort of philosophy that I still hold. When you go buy a car, do you ask how it was done, or do you just expect it to be perfect? The reality is, at the moment, we're not marketing because and not to sound pretentious, but it's Mirvac. We're 50 years in the business. We're strong brand. We don't need to further upsell, but we are capturing data on performance and using that in our marketing. For example, if we're getting air tightness down by 30%, that converts to a savings on energy and bills. We're starting to utilize those kinds of learnings, and we wanted lots of learning before we go put it on a marketing on collateral. So we're going to start utilizing that. Things like post-completion and quality, the reality is you kind of can't really market that. We can't show them that settlement cracking is significantly reduced because customers and the layman, they expect it to be perfect, doesn't matter how you build it. So you almost do expose the fact of traditional construction has obvious elements. So we do have a want to promote through marketing benefits in performance for the end user. But when it comes to quality, well, it's Mirvac. We're doing quality no matter whether we're doing prefab or not.
That's an interesting one, David. As WoodSolutions, you know, in the last 5 or 6 years moved into mid-rise construction, particularly in, you know, the sort of class 2, 3 and 5 buildings. I mean, quality was a key thing for us because you've got to get the quality right, you know, particularly around fire and acoustics and those sort of things in the non-residential sector. I mean, just as important, I think, particularly in apartments and townhouses. But quality really is key, and it really is sad in Australia to some degree that the consumer sort of has this perception of what the biggest house for the cheapest price. You know, good quality is sort of something, or poor quality we almost take for granted with things that we buy these days. As you said, you never buy a car and just sort of, you know, with a door handle falling off or things not working correctly. And yet in sort of Europe and Japan, you know, quality is seen by the consumer as a real value. I mean, you know, as soon as we start to shift that mentality in Australia, people will understand, I think, a lot better the, you know, the benefits of prefabrication. It sort of ties, I think, into the question Tom sort of asked here about, you know, I think sort of customers' perceptions and expectations are changing. I think quality is going to be a lot higher. As you said about air leakage, we've got a, you know, comment here around passive house, ultimately where it could go. But also, as Tim asks about, you know, the impact on the environment, reduction of carbon emissions, embodied energy, toxicity of materials. Yeah, I think all of these things sort of lend to prefab and the benefits, and particularly using timber. Are you finding sort of those messages resonating a bit more with customers?
And look, thanks, Tim, for sending quite a few of those. I think the reality is, honestly, this is becoming actually the #1 thing that I'm utilising to push this further. Mirvac's obviously very well known and being publicly listed. We've gone carbon zero 9 years ahead, but we don't want to have to pay carbon offsets in order to achieve that. We want to get the carbon footprint down. We're starting to generate a lot of work and data collection in the carbon footprint different. And to be honest with you, I feel one of the biggest things, and you've mentioned there about reconsider materials being used. I will share that Moorebank Sydney project that we're in construction of now, when we were in design concept phase 5 years ago, the entire project was bricks. It took me a long time to convince the business that your perception of the customer wanting bricks needs to be challenged. We did customer focus groups. We understood, we looked around the areas. That project now has not one brick on it. All right, we've been able to utilize so many different materials in the market, get that architectural outcome, which we really, really are happy with in so many ways. There's 179 homes in that estate, 3,500 people on the database wanted to buy one. We were able to prove that Hebel as a main cladding substrate on a carbon is very different. We also obviously got a scenario that if it was all bricks, we couldn't do prefab. But definitely we're starting to capture, and there's a lot more software on the market now where you can punch in certain quantities and get punched out what kind of carbon in tons. And this is something that's going to be a big, big scenario moving forward. And it ties into what you said about customers have become more and more concerned about their living expenses, and where we can prove to them that your house performs better, cooler in summer, warmer in winter, without you having to run an aircon, and potentially instead of getting an 18 kilowatt aircon, maybe you can get a 10. Things like that are becoming a massive benefit that we're going to be able to utilize a lot more moving forward.
And you're right, David, and I think we're going to see that even more as we see the new 7-star minimum energy efficiency regulations come into play, if the government will ever announce when that's going to happen and how long will the transition. But yeah, certainly in cooler climates such as the Melbourne, Hobart climates, that's going to be such a key thing. I mean, as you mentioned, everyone's energy bills are starting to go through the roof now. You know, people are going to be more conscious on payback periods for improvements. We've got a question.
So can I just answer Jamie's question? Because there's a few people that asked a similar one, and it's one I get asked a lot. Yeah, all well and good, Dave, you save waste on site, but it's just producing it in the factory, isn't it? But we've done the studies on this, and this is why it's good to partner properly. Timber truss, for example, or sink. You know how much easier it is to control waste in a facility compared to on site? Yes, there's a bit of waste produced, but it's in the interest of the manufacturer to reuse as much as possible. That's how they get their efficiency. So I might have saved 60% on site, and that's what's important to me. But in the factory, the amount of waste you can fit in one little bin for one house, there is really minimal amount, because the amount of reuse on timber is phenomenal in their factories. And also too, when it comes to materials like cladding, being able to do offcuts and reuse, where honestly, and without being disrespectful, the laziness sometimes of the trade base when they're cutting major materials, oh, I'll just chuck this one in bin and I'll get another whole new panel to start my next one. They don't want to do that in the factory. They want to utilize. So it is much easier to control in the factory. And it's a good question because I always get that one asked.
No, thanks, David. I was about to jump to that one because waste is such a critical one, and it is difficult in Australia. I mean, countries around the world are often sort of managing site waste, but we're such a big country. It's that tyranny of distance, you know, where to actually pick up sort of waste from small points and sort of, you know, be able to productively use it is difficult. But definitely as we move into the circular economy, it's certainly really a critical area. Look, we're just on the time now, so I really want to thank you, David, for your presentation today and for being so open and honest, and you know, about the benefits and the challenges and what needs to be done. Just for the audience, certainly from a sort of wood product sector point of view, we're very keen to see, as we move forward, more capacity in the supply chain. It's been tough, as everyone knows at the moment, with the Class 1 market being up 30%. Everyone's just flat out trying to deliver what jobs they've got, and everyone's struggling with labour and increased price of materials. But as that market starts to flatten out, as we know it will over the next 12 to 18 months, definitely sort of keen to see an increase in the prefabricated offering. So we hope you'll be available to assist us with that path, David, because I know you're so keen, particularly with the work you do for Prefab Oz, to see this really take off. So thank you once again for an absolutely terrific presentation.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Just a reminder to everyone that webinars are recorded. So if you'd like to go back and re-look at this or pass it on to your friends, there's some great information provided today. You can just go to that events page on the WoodSolutions website. It'll be uploaded probably in the next couple of days. So our next webinar in 2 weeks' time, on the 23rd of August, is entitled Fire Safe Use of Wood in Buildings, the Global Design Guide. It really is a standout audience of presenters here, some of the real experts in fire in timber buildings, both in residential and mid-rise type buildings. So I'd encourage you to participate in that webinar in 2 weeks' time. So thanks once again, everyone. It's great to have you on board, and have a safe week, and we'll see you at our next webinar.